Baldurs Gate 3 is the long-awaited sequel to the classic tabletop adventure video game series. The original two games were made over 20 years ago based on the second edition Dungeons & Dragons rules. It became one of the most successful RPGs to date. Baldurs Gate 3 recently released into early access, and there are a lot of people questioning should they buy it now or wait till it's fully released. Hopefully after this video you'll have a better idea on what to do. The game is set 100 years after Baldurs Gate 2 in the land of Faerun. The mind players are using ships that can teleport through the worlds to invade the Forgotten Realms and capturing people and infecting them with tadpoles to produce more mind players. You and your companions are some of these unfortunate people to be infected, but unlike the others you have not turned. Your main goal is to find someone who can help you remove the tadpoles before you turn. The first thing you will need to do is make a character. Currently only custom characters are available, but in the future you'll have preset characters to choose from if you don't feel like being creative. Throughout customizing your character you'll get to decide on the race of it and its sub-race. These determine the features of your character and traits. A dwarf, for example, has proficiencies with hammers and axes and are inherently tougher. Once you've decided on your race, you'll want to customize the look of said character. And no matter what gender you choose from, you can choose between both male and female voices, and you can have a beard if you want. So if you want a female green-haired bearded halfling who sounds like Gimli from Lord of the Rings, you could probably do that. Next it's time to decide what class you want to be. Those who are familiar with D&D will recognise these classes, and those who are familiar with most RPGs will understand they aren't really that different. Currently in game there are 6 classes to choose from. A cleric, which is a priest who represents their deity with different spells and are pretty handy in combat. You'll probably have a lot of healing spells and buffs as a cleric. A fighter, which is your standard RPG tank, pretty self-explanatory in that regard. You'll want one of these guys up in the front distracting the enemy and tanking for your damage dealers. Ranger and rogue are fairly similar in combat, both are proficient with bows, but the rangers more focused scouts. Their abilities are focused on nature and animals. The rogues on the other hand are more for your thieves and your pickpocketers. You'll want one of these in your party if you want to get past the locked doors you will find on your travels. Warlocks are people who have basically sold their soul to Patron for supernatural abilities and magic. I've not really played much with warlocks apart from spamming Eldritch Blast at goblins. And lastly, wizards can be kitted out with a flora of magic from healing to damaging, from buffing to debuffing. After you've chosen your class you'll want to pick which skills you want. This all depends on what class you choose. A rogue might be better off with stealth, deception and sleight of hand, whereas your fighter better off with intimidation and athletics. There's quite a few in the game right now, so have fun and try some combinations you want. After all this you will then get to decide on what your character stats are. Strength determines your damage and hit chance of strength based weapons. Strength weapons are all melee. It also dictates how far you can jump and how much you can carry. I won't worry about this too much as you can always move items around amongst your party if you really need to. Don't put too much points into this for your rogues and rangers, they won't need it. Dexterity determines your damage and hit chance of dexterity based weapons. Dexterity weapons are all range and any melee with finesse. It also affects initiative. Initiative decides when someone fights. The game rolls 1d20, then adds dexterity to decide who goes first in a combat. It also affects how much your enemies can hit you. Constitution is your health. More constitution increases your modifiers which lead to more health. How much health each class is given is based on the average roll for each of the classes. I won't be going into that in this video, but you can probably figure it out yourself if you want to know. Intelligence, wisdom and charisma all affect casting abilities. More intelligence, more likely your wizards will hit their magic casts. More wisdom, more likely your cleric's cast will work. Charisma works the same way. They also affect in-game dialogue options too, but I'll go on that in a bit. Visually the game is okay. The people look like people, the trees look like trees, and the goblins are small and ugly. What more can you ask for? One of my biggest complaints in RPG title is the excessive quests that force you to go from one place to another and the world is still dead. It's not worth exploring. I never really had that issue, at least so far with Baldurs Gate. If you want me to go to point A to point B, then let the world be worth exploring. Throughout my campaign there was a mixture of areas to discover, going from waking up on a beach to going through a crashed ship, finding some of your captors stuck under things or laying about dead. From a village full of lively people to a ransacked village full of goblins. I never felt forced to go anywhere. I never felt compelled to instantly stop what I was doing and instantly complete the quest. Why have a full world to discover if you only want to do quests because the world isn't worth the time to explore? One thing to note however, I enjoy exploring the world, but there were many instances when I stumbled upon combat without knowing, and with how the combat system is, you can't back out of any form of combat. Not being able to back out of combat can be quite an annoying thing. It stops you from being able to continue exploring without the worry of getting forced into a combat situation you might struggle with or simply want to save for another time. though I did hear this was a problem in Divinity Original Sins. Character models themselves are generally well made. There are quite a few different races you will discover. The animations are generally okay, though occasionally mid-conversation people with T-pose or do twitchy movements. There are also some other small visual bugs with dead bodies ragdolling when they die across your screen. But nothing game-breaking from my experience, but it does shatter that immersion when you're trying to talk to people or you kill certain enemies and they are twitching like they've not slept properly in weeks. Biggest thing that stood out to me was the sound effects. They really bring the immersion together. As you progress through the game, you'll hear birds tweeting, fire burning, hover past some trees, and you hear them move. A cage you can hear creaking. It really makes the world feel alive. My biggest problem in some RPGs is that there are massive gaps between combat or story when you're exploring and walking around, but the world just feels dead. There's nothing to listen to, there's nothing to discover. And the combat sounds, you'll probably not notice them as much when you have a goblin charging with a sword ready to turn you into lunch, but there are some nice sound effects too. Baldurs Gate 3 is played out on the 5th edition D&D system. Now, I'm not really that knowledgeable on D&D, so I'll only be looking at how it works in-game. The game is not much different to most RPGs you know. You go around exploring the map, discovering your companions, picking up quests, killing enemies and getting rewards and XP. I think the biggest difference are really the combat and the skill checks. Skill checks are mainly done in by the game in the background, but in some instances, like in the dialogue, you will have choices which lead to a literal dice roll. It will tell you the number you need to pass the check, but from what I can tell, there is no indication to what you need prior to the skill check, at least not for those who do not know D&D. You can't back out of a skill check either. Generally speaking, I found so far nothing has screwed me too badly. Most just change the outcome in some way, but it does somewhat promote save scumming if you do get yourself into a situation before because you didn't know you needed 18 on a d20 roll. Why is it 18? Why is it affecting this? There are instances where dialogue will pop up before a fight and you can avoid the situation if you pass the skill check. If you hover over it, it will show you modifiers, but unless you have some knowledge of D&D prior to this, it doesn't really tell you what you'd need until you click it. And even then, it doesn't tell you why this number is selected. The people I have asked that know D&D more have just said it's all contextual, so you need to guess what the difficulty modifier is based on the action you're doing. Developers are the DM and you've got to think about what they deem hard or easy, which can be quite tedious, especially as a first time player and or someone new to D&D. In D&D, the DM is the one who creates the world. You are playing in the world that has already been predetermined, the choices are all hard coded, and D&D you can pretty much do whatever you wish, say whatever you will. It does not work as well when everything is predetermined before you play, like it is in Baldurs Gate. So I think there could be better transparency on the dialogue skill checks. That all being said, I don't think it's a bad thing. It does add to the storytelling as well. It really is down to what kind of player you are. If you love randomness, you'll probably get along with this more. Though having a way to show the chances of success wouldn't be a bad thing either. Let the players choose whether they want to know the difficulty or not. Combat in Baldurs Gate 3 is turn-based. The turn order is based on initiative. The initiative is based on a roll of a d20 plus the character's dexterity stat. The game will do this for you. There are many types of things you can do in a battle, and they're split up into two types, actions and bonus actions. Actions are your primary choice, they replenish each turn in combat. This is used for attacking, healing, helping your companions up, or casting a spell or cantrip. Though it should also be noted that cantrips do not require spell slots, but casting a spell does. A caster can have multiple spell slots available to them, but once they are used they will not replenish until you take a long rest at your campsite. There are currently no negatives for going back to your camp and resting from what I have seen. You can do it whenever you want as long as you're not in combat. This is something that will eventually have negatives, suggest the devs. This will stop people from constantly regaining their health and spell slots whenever they want. I don't think I ever took a short rest in my time with the game. There was no reason to. You should not be able to teleport back into your camp from inside a goblin village with enemy goblins about. When you go for an attack, you have to pass two checks, a hit chance check and a damage check. Hit chance is based on the character's armor class. If you have an armor class of 14, that is the roll needed for the enemy to hit you, and the same for your hits. The roll is affected by a dice roll plus your dexterity or strength modifiers, based on what type of weapon is being used, be it a ranged weapon or a melee weapon. Damage is all based on the dice roll plus your dexterity or strength depending on the weapon as well. What is a dexterity or strength based weapon, you ask? You wouldn't know by looking in game, the tooltips do not tell you what is what, but from what I've gathered, all melee weapons are strength based unless it has the keyword finesse, then it's either strength or dexterity depending on your highest stat, or ranged weapons are dexterity based, so you want your rangers and rogues to have bows and your tanks want to be using melee weapons. This is not at all defined anywhere from what I can see in the game. You're just meant to know based on past knowledge of D&D. It took me a while to understand what the different weapons were, and it's fairly simple. I don't like the idea of me having to tab out of the game just to go to the D&D website to learn this, but I also don't think you absolutely need to know, as you can get away with not knowing and getting away with it, but I still would like to see more info on the tooltips or some form of in-game encyclopedia. They're not only primary actions, but there are also bonus actions to do. These can be done separately from attacks and spells. Bonus actions can add a bit of extra flavour to the battle, but I wouldn't say they're absolutely required to win it. They're more situational. The one bonus action I regularly use is jump. Jump can be used outside of combat too, but in combat it's used to disengage from enemies without activating the opportunity attack and saving you from free damage. There are 3 other types of bonus actions: dip, shove and hide. Dip is used to coat your weapon in something to get bonus damage. I haven't found myself using this a ton, but when I did it was nice to get that extra bit of damage to help towards winning a battle. Shove is great for when you're fighting near an edge of the map, but not really useful otherwise. When you're near the edge of a cliff or something, you can just shove an enemy down to their depths without having to fight them man to man. Lastly, there is hide. Never used it before because I just prefer fighting the battles, but if you like to sneak about past enemies, you'll want to turn based on and use this often. It can be used out of combat and you can combine it with knocking enemies unconscious for added effects. Overall, there are positives and negatives of turn-based combat. I don't mind it too much as it can add that bit of randomness, but if you don't prepare yourself for combat often, you might be one-shotted to the 9 hours and lose the game. There are no formations in the game, so you can't really preset anything. Yes, you can prepare for some combat, but some of the random encounters that you can't really prepare for, it might screw you over. This isn't happening all the time though, and turn-based does allow you to think about what you want to do and plan it out, so it does add that strategy towards it or some breathing room. Though I much preferred the way the old Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic games did it. It paused when the enemy was spotted, and you can unpause and pause whenever you wish, and the combat was generally played out in real time. Other games like Dragon Age have a way to have AI use specific spells if possible, so there is ways around it. So now that we got that out of the way, do I think Baldurs Gate is worth being picked up now? Well, I do believe Larian has done a great job with the game and it's been fairly stable, but I still think it needs more time. If you're very in love with D&D and have no other games to buy, then you might want to pick it up now. It is in a playable state, but if you're a newcomer, I would wait. If you want the full experience, then again, I would wait. The game isn't going anywhere and they have plenty of time to fix the issues and add to it. I'm looking forward to seeing how the game is when it releases out of early access.